Today I want to talk from the topic, creation's liberation, and I'll be using as a text Romans 8, verses 19 through 21. And it reads, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God." I don't have what you would refer to as a green thumb. As a matter of fact, you'd probably say I have a brown thumb. I may have mentioned before that when I was the pastor of GSN Ministries earlier on, um, the church tried to give me some gifts for the anniversary of my years in ministry. And one of the things they gave me, I tried to give back because they didn't know what they were doing. They gave me a plant. Now, I didn't want to take it, but I finally accepted it. But I asked the members to remember that plant in their prayers so that I would not destroy it. But that plant still lives 20 years later as a plant that grew from one of the clippings of the original plant. It's an amazing, beautiful little plant that I think I should give it a name. Maybe I should name it Grace because there's so much mercy that that plant has towards somebody like me who forgets to water it. It will begin to look bad and droopy, looking like there's no way to revive it. But then if I give it a decent amount of water, within hours it starts to look better. And by the next day, it's back to its full perky self. I thought about that plant last week as we celebrated Earth Week all week and Earth Day on Thursday. For many years, we, especially Americans, didn't think much about what our leaded gas and our smokestacks were doing to the air that we breathe. That was until Rachel Carson's book came out in 1962. That was her book, Silent Spring. That started to bring an awareness to what we were doing. And then in 1969, after a massive oil spill, there were teach-ins on college campuses and universities. The organizers chose April 22nd, since that was a day between spring break and final exams. But they inspired 20 million Americans, 10% of the population, to participate in demonstrations against the 150 years of industrial development and the negative impact it was having on the health and well-being of people. Groups that had been fighting individually against things like oil spills and polluting factories and power plants and raw sewage and toxic dumps and pesticides and freeways and the loss of wilderness and the extinction of wildlife. These groups united on Earth Day, all around a shared common purpose, which is saving our Earth. Over the years, Earth Day expanded and now it's global. Today, Earth Day is widely recognized as the largest secular observance in the world, marked by more than 1 billion people every year as a day of action to change human behavior and create global, national, and local policy changes. Today, our awareness is much more than just trying to water a wilting plant. It's about saving a sickening planet. But Earth cannot heal itself. It takes all of us to be aware, concerned, and involved. In many ways, that's what our text for today is all about. Our text comes out of the book of Romans, as we say, Paul's letter to the church at Rome. It's believed that this is one of the few books that was actually written by Paul, because as we've mentioned in the past, some of the books attributed to Paul were not actually written by him. But during Paul's time, life for Christians was a little tenuous because they had external persecution, but they also had problems that came within the Christian community. But in our text for today, Paul was trying to bring attention to a higher level of common issues rather than speak to specific interrelational concerns. During the time when Paul was writing to the followers of the way or the Christians in Rome, there were environmental concerns that were common to all. Rome was growing rapidly and expanding its reach out to other lands. And as more people began to inhabit Rome, They used up more firewood and more grains until they started to become scarce. Some would suggest that it was this human environmental interaction which led to the political and military decisions to conquer other lands. Additionally, Rome was a very cosmopolitan city for its time, with all of the latest and the best items available for the affluent. But they used highly toxic metals in their makeup, in their water pipes, and in their bathtubs. And in particular, they used quite a bit of lead. They came to understand that lead was dangerous, but still they wanted to use it to support their way of living. So they made slaves run the lead mines. Can somebody say the beginning of environmental injustice? Then there was also the fact that the growing Christian faith did not regard nature with the same respect as the pagan belief systems. And this left the former sacred ground open for destruction. Deforestation, destruction of agriculture, environmental toxins, and disregard for nature. Paul could not stay silent on these concerns. And that's why he said, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God." In Paul's view, the whole earth, all of creation, had been in bondage to the people who had taken it for granted, misused it, abused it, who had not honored it for the true magnificence that nature was meant to be honored with from the beginning. It could be that he used the language of bondage due to what he knew out of scripture, which would suggest that the Israelites perhaps went into bondage because of their disrespect for the land, as found in Leviticus 26, which says in part, "Then the land shall enjoy its Sabbath years as long as it lies desolate, while you are in the land of your enemies. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbath years. As long as it lies desolate, it shall have the rest it did not have on your Sabbaths when you were living on it." In Paul's view, the land was in need of liberation. It was in need of respect and care. It needed the humans who were expected to be stewards over the earth, meaning caretakers, to start acting like it instead of exploiting it. But first, the humans had to remember their true identity and their true responsibility. And that's why the text says that creation will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Paul was saying, as God sent Jesus to rescue humans by teaching us about the love of God, God sent Jesus's siblings, you and I, to rescue creation. One of the books I read this week was titled A Trinitarian Theology of Nature by Zane Winslow. And I like the name she used for God in her book. She referred to God as love that created. I believe that's a reference that Paul would have understood when he suggested that as children of God, we should be like God and be love that created and protects instead of love that destroys. As we are reminded frequently, and especially on Earth Day, we are ruining our planet due to our overconsumption. We've been on this path ever since the Industrial Revolution. Human population didn't change much up until the point of the Industrial Revolution. In the book, Our Earth, Our Species, Ourselves, How to Thrive While Creating a Sustainable World, Ellen Moyer highlighted how over the past 800,000 years, there were rises and falls of the living population due to ice ages. But then it shows a dramatic spike in the human population over the past 100 years. We need to make some changes if we want natural resources to last, especially now that we've increased the population to approximately 7 billion people. Moyer highlights, most Americans take for granted that unlimited quantities of water, that finite and 100% necessary resource with zero substitutes, will always be available, right where we want it. When one day you turn on the faucet handle and clean water does not come out, complacency will instantly change to respect for water. We have allowed water to become contaminated with sewage, with trash, pesticides, fertilizers, petroleum products, heavy metals, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and other contaminants. I read that 1 in 7 people on Earth lack access to clean water, and 1 in 5 have to walk long distances just to get it. Deforestation accounts for a large percentage of the greenhouse gas emissions and reduces the future ability of forests to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Yet we continue to clear cut and only minimally replace the many trees we cut down. You know, I literally cry every time I end up driving behind or even seeing a truck full of recently cut trees. It's like we forgot that we need trees and plants to clean our air. Or do we think someone else will have to worry about that years from now? A recent National Geographic reported that viral death rates from COVID-19 were higher in places with the highest particle pollution. Worldwide, particle pollution accounted for 15% of the COVID-19 deaths. It's interesting to note that in China, improved air quality may have saved more lives than the virus took. Industrially produced meat and dairy comes from animals that are raised in often deplorable conditions, and they're full of pesticides, hormones, and antibiotics. And then our air pollution, it damages the heart and the lungs and the brain, and it contributes to strokes. And we know that all things are not equal. I can't remember if it was National Geographic or Time magazine that reported that rich Black Americans breathe more pollution than poor white Americans. And I also read, I think it was in Time, as we've been cleaning up the air in this country, we've cleaned the air mostly where white people live. And let's not even talk about the location of landfills. National Geographic stated, with COVID-19, deaths happen right away. With air pollution, it just adds up over time. It's a pandemic in slow motion. As Paul was trying to get across to the people of his day, creation is held captive by human mismanagement, disregard, apathy, abuse, and greed. And humans are the only ones who can change it. Trees can't vote. Fish can't stop plastics in their oceans. Deer can't block deforestation. And the sun can't adjust its heat. But it's not too late for us to make a difference. If we recognize who we really are as a manifestation of love that created, perhaps we can help liberate creation from those who hold it bondage. What can we do? There are a few things we can do. On a national level, Biden is trying to get the US back on track in the fight against this devastation from climate change. But all nations and all persons need to keep the pressure on. We can vote and lobby and encourage our elected officials to consider things like offshore energy with solar and wind power. That could help avoid about 1/3 of the yearly carbon emissions. In places where coal continues to be mined and continues to be used, we could push for carbon capture and storage. And then in our cities, where 76% of CO2 emissions come from energy use, we could push for things like smog-eating concrete, or wind or sun-powered streetlights, or energy-efficient buildings, capturing water for reuse. And even the businesses that we're involved with, we can encourage our workplaces to use their environmental strategy for competitive advantage. We could try to encourage our businesses to do some repowering, which means use some alternative sources for power. But then finally, individually, me and you, we can make a difference because we have a problem when it comes to personal consumption. The average American uses, I've read, 12,000 watts of power per year. But in other places around the world, for example, Bangladesh uses 300 watts of power per year. I read maybe we should target 2,000 per person per year. We need a conscientious reduction in energy use and waste of all kinds. Maybe we could turn off the lights when you're not in the room, or wear more clothes rather than automatically turn up the heat, or use fans instead of turning up the air conditioning, or we could travel less. We could walk or bike when possible, but stay away from busy roads. We could go small. I don't know how people do it, but I like watching these shows of people going to tiny living. We could conserve water. We could recycle. We could use smart technology for things like thermostats and lights. And we could eat less meat and processed food all around. And we could spend a little bit more time acknowledging the gift God has given us in the life of our lives and the lives of everything around us. We can go to a park. You'll be amazed. Look outside and marvel at the sun, the moon, and the stars. Appreciate the birds and the animals. Really look at the beauty of the plants and the trees. Recognize this is God's world that was created for everyone, not just for us. I'm glad today to be aware of this wonderful creation that we're all a part of. We sometimes treat creation like it's separate from us, but creation is us. That recent Time magazine article I stated before said, the science is clear and the threat is real. The facts on the ground are outstripping the worst case scenarios. The cost of inaction or inadequate actions are unacceptable. As Paul wrote for his audience, and by extension to us, creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. You and I are the children of God. You and I are love that created. It's time for all of us to show up and do what we can to liberate and to heal our creation. Thanks for listening.